Hello, I'm Bret Moss, and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Jin Kwon Kim. Jin Kwon Kim is a Korean-American graduate student at the Unification Theological Seminary in upstate New York. He's also a project manager at an architectural firm in Manhattan. Jin Kwon has a bachelor's degree in architecture from the Rhode Island School of Design. He was born in Brazil and immigrated to the United States at the age of 3. He currently lives in New Jersey. Jin Kwon Kim, welcome to The Defining Moment. It's really a pleasure for me to welcome you here to our studio.
Great, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming. Our topic today is Multiculturalism 101, a Korean-American perspective. And I'd like to begin by asking you to share a defining moment from your own life.
All right, well, I have two really big defining moments that have occurred in my life. The first one was I was in a seminar for self-awareness type development. And basically as I was exploring and trying to discover what it was that really made me tick, I understood that something in my life that happened in the past really kept me from allowing myself to really trust and really love people. And so I came to a point where, as I started to come closer and closer to this, I understood that the inability for me to really experience that, and actually a lot of loneliness I had experienced for a long, long time in my life, was a result of that. And so when I came to grips with that, and I understood that this perceived loneliness that I had was actually something that I had created throughout my life because of this kind of frame of mind that I had. And so when I came to a realization is that if I had taken that out, if I took this out and I was able to really experience the love and the trust that I was looking for, then a lot of the perceived loneliness that I experienced for a long, long time, it would really be a figment of my imagination. And as I was sitting there with this room full of people who were also professionals and accomplished in their own right, I began to realize that a lot of the things that we go through are very much in our state of mind. And that led me, I made another jump realizing that I am experiencing this on a mental level, whereas there are many people out there experiencing this on a physical level. People who are, say, in Africa starving, or all the genocide that occurs, or all the horrors that we hear about on the news all the time. And for the most part, those things are kind of things that are kept a little bit distant from me. But going through this process, I really got to somewhere inside of my own consciousness or my own being that really connected to this pain that they were experiencing, although I had never experienced it myself. And for me, the way that occurred to me was that I was really tapping into what some people may call the human consciousness, or some other people may call even God. And so for me, how I perceived it was that I was experiencing what it is that other people experience, but also perhaps what God can experience when he sees all of his children suffering and going through all this chaos and conflict. And that, when I hit that point there, that totally blew me away. It was like an atomic bomb going inside me, and I was just completely emotional. I was practically sobbing. And that, for me, when I was able to see how much God actually suffers, and really be able to feel the impact, not only in my life, but also because taking my life as an example, seeing how so many people go through something similar or even worse, and then the accumulation of that is experience that actually God experiences, I was just blown away completely. So that was the first one. That first one also allowed me to realize the second one, which was I was in I think it was during a Sunday service actually, and I was sitting there kind of again reflecting basically on what my purpose was. Because now I was at a point where I understood that there was so much pain and suffering out there in the world, and I was trying to grapple with what is my relationship, or how do I fit into this larger picture, and what is my value perhaps. So it was very, again, it was just an amazing experience. I somehow started to reflect internally, and I started to think about the emotions that I was experiencing and the emotions I experienced before. And a lot of times what I would try to do is try to either resolve them internally somehow or be able to work through them. And this time around, for some reason, when I went inside, it was as if the floor had dropped out from under me. This is all kind of going on in my mind. But what happened was I was sitting there in the service, and I was kind of in my state of mind, kind of going deeper and deeper inside myself. And if you've ever seen the movie Contact, there's a scene where Jodie Foster's going through these wormholes, and she pops out, and there's this amazing view of this galaxy, this spiral galaxy, just kind of slowly rotating. And simultaneously with that, I was trying to move this experience that I was feeling inside of me, and I couldn't do it. And for me, the way that really, what it meant for me was that this was God showing me what He was for me, that there was something embedded inside of me that would never and could never move. And this was a stable rock that I could always have in my life. And I would never, never be able to lose that. And the galaxy for me represented the value that I had as an individual, and that I was worth this whole entire galaxy, or even perhaps even the universe. And I think where I took that from, took that again, is applying that to, if I was this valuable, then I could look to the person next to me and also see that how valuable this person could be. And that, again, totally transformed my perspective and how I relate to people around me, and really allowed me to see truly the beauty, I think, in many people. Whereas before, I would see you perhaps as you are, but now I can see when you speak, there's something that you are representative of, or something that you have inside of you, that if I just look beyond, perhaps even if you're yelling at me or you're cursing at me, if I can go beyond that and see what deeper value you have to me and what I have to you, our relationship totally transforms. It's totally a different kind of relationship. And so for me, that was really the second kind of defining moment, really being able to understand the value of people, myself included.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you so much. It might come as a surprise to many of our viewers to learn that Korea is predominantly a Christian nation, and that it was American missionaries that brought Christianity to Korea. Tell us something about Christianity in Korea.
One of the things about Christianity, especially in Korea, which is very interesting that most people probably will not know, is that when Japan had invaded Korea and annexed Korea as their own colony, the rebellion against the oppressors became very much tied into the Christian movement. And so the liberation effort actually also became intertwined with the Christian movement as well. So what happened was, when there was a liberation, that liberating force, the people who were fighting for freedom, were eventually people who would then go into power. And so Christianity became deeply embedded into the psyche of the whole entire country. And so now you can see the results of that. You see that Korea is probably one of the most, I know that it sends, after America, it sends the most Christian missionaries around the world. And if you meet Korean Christians, you will certainly see that they are very fervent, very passionate about their faith. And in Korea as well, I do know that although it's a highly Confucius structured society, also Buddhism does play a role, but I know Korean Christians are very, very much a large part of how people think. And especially here in America too, there's Korean Christian churches in all the Korean populated areas. There's like hundreds or thousands of them. So,
okay, very interesting. Thank you. You're obviously very fluent in English. How does your dominance of the English language open doors for you and make the process of assimilation easier than for someone obviously who comes here and doesn't speak the language as well as you do?
Yeah, that's pretty clearly in the workforce. I have several Koreans also who work in my office, and you can clearly see that the language barriers do create conflicts and difficulty and tension between the boss and also the workers, between coworkers. So for me, having a ability to speak the language well makes a tremendous difference in me being able to succeed, but also in terms of culturally understand how society itself works. I've come to understand that language plays a large role in how culture itself becomes embedded. I think one of the signs for me has always been, if you can understand a joke in a certain language, then you understand the cultural. But that implies that you also have a mastery, or at least some sort of command over the language. So in that sense, I do think that speaking English has a big, big influence in how successful someone can be in America. On the flip side, of course, too, myself, I speak Korean pretty well, But I know that if I were to go to Korea, that there would be some level of the similar kind of thing happening for me as well in Korea.
Okay, good. Very interesting. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about Korean history and culture. Korean history is thousands of years old. Throughout its history, Korea has been attacked by other nations on numerous occasions, but Korea has never attacked another country before. Tell us about the tradition of peaceful coexistence and strong family ties that we find among the Korean people.
Koreans have always occurred to me as being very humble and very peace-loving, essentially. You are right, historically speaking, that Koreans have never invaded other countries, so that does speak a lot to the Korean character and the culture itself. In terms of the family, I believe that the notions of family are very, very strong. I think today, in today's society, in Korean society, it's become very westernized, so a lot of the valuable aspects actually are being lost in Korea itself. And I do feel that that's a bit of a pity, because I feel that the Korean values that are embedded in more the conservative, more the traditional, have such depth and such a richness that we in America can benefit tremendously from. And one thing that's actually kind of interesting is that my parents, or parents of immigrants, parents who immigrated here, when they left the country with their values and traditions kind of intact. And they were determined to bring those as best as they could to this country. And so they raised their children with that in mind. However, in Korea, because of all the societal changes and many big changes, shifts in the way that people think, a lot of the values are starting to be dumbed down or not really valued as much as they used to be. So this is maybe a generalization, but I can see that a lot of Korean Americans who live in America actually are very much more traditional and more conservative than a lot of, say, my friends that I have in Korea.
Interesting.
So that is something that I think, I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but in my own family, I would really love to see that culture being preserved.
Okay. Tell us something about the clan system in Korea.
I remember when I was a kid, I was in Korea, and my dad showed me a stack of books, probably about this high. And we were just flipping through, and all the names and all the families were all written down. So there still is that sense. But again, the modern Korean culture doesn't really appreciate that as much. But because Korean culture, it is Confucius in nature, there is such a deeply embedded sense of how you relate to someone. Confucianism basically is a system of how someone relates to the father, the mother, the siblings, or even society, how, to leaders and stuff like that.
Can you explain that in detail?
So more in detail, for example, in my family, if my older sister, I have a certain phrase for her. I call her my nuna. And my younger sister is my 동생, and I have a younger brother. And each person has actually a title, if you will, of how to describe the relationship they have with you. So one interesting facet of how this system plays out in a Korean family is the people will refer to the other people in the room according to what the youngest person in the room would call them. For example, you have a mother, father, older brother, younger sister, and youngest brother, right? So the father would call the older brother 형, which means older brother. Obviously, the father is not the older brother is not the older brother to the father, but he calls him that to educate the youngest son how he should call the older brother. And so that whenever you're in a room of this kind of familial setting, then you will always refer to whoever you're speaking to from the perspective of the youngest. And so as you can see, this whole mindset is centered upon how you relate to each other within a family, and also how you educate your children on how they can also be able to relate to their family. I think this is very important because the relationships within the family, if they're cluttered, if they're confused, then it opens up a door for conflict. And if you take this to a higher level where it's society as well, because this does play a role in society, in the workforce, for example, there's definitely certain titles or certain references of respect that everyone gives to each other.
Yeah.
And if everyone's on the same playing field, you obviously have conflicts of who's telling who to do what. But if it's very clear that there is one person who is calling shots, for example, and everyone can be able to support that, then it's a very different relationship. Of course, the flip side of this is that it is open to abuse, which I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable with or obviously don't appreciate. So of course, there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah.
But I think there is quite a beauty in the way that things, how it develops in terms of within a family. There's, again, that develops that richness, that depth, that the relationships can become so deep if it's done appropriately and if it's done with love.
And that's something you have to see to appreciate. Talking about it doesn't really do justice to it.
Yes, definitely. I think it's really the emotional experience you have when someone, an older brother to younger brother, takes care and loves them, and in return the younger brother gives love and respect to the older brother. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Tell us about the attribute of Korean culture, which is conveyed in the meaning of the Korean word Han.
Wow, Han is a very deep word that is very difficult to express in English. I think one of the things that comes out, I think, in the Korean culture, in the Korean psyche, perhaps, there is a very deep, deep sense of suffering, but also of love. And maybe to give a little context here, in my belief, we believe that man is created in the image of God, and in that sense, if you look at certain types of people, you have different characteristics, different kinds of characteristics each kind of person, which makes each individual unique. And I think in the same way, the different cultures or different peoples, if you will, I think also representative of characteristics of what God represents. So if you put in that context, I think the deep heart, and also because love is there's a fine line between love and hate, as we well know. And I think the love aspect, because it's experienced so deeply, if you love someone so much and they hurt you, the consequence of that is a lot of pain as well. So I think in terms of that context, I think the Korean culture for me has always been an experience of deep love, but also deep sorrow. And Han really refers to that. It's a very, very powerful concept that expresses the sorrow that the Korean people feel and have felt. You had mentioned before that through the thousands of years of Korean history, it's been invaded multiple times. And even now, the division between North and South causes a great deal of conflict and pain between the families that are separated. And so that, of course, we can't go into depth into how much, and I can't really explain exactly how much, but it really is something that is so intense, really.
Yeah, I mean, we can see it, glimpses of it, when there are these meetings of Koreans reunited from North and South. It's very tearful, emotional, deeply emotional experience, a lot of tears.
I think when I think of the sorrow, I think of the way that a Korean mother cries for her children or for a child. Sometimes you see these Korean dramas where they're very dramatized, but it's similar to what you see on television, for example, in the Middle East, where the women are keening over their children. It's like just this gut-wrenching from the soul, such a deep, deep heart-like love and desire to really love their children. So I mean, I really love my mother, so I can get a sense of the pain and also the love that I experienced from my mom when she gives me so much love, and sometimes if I'm not quite in tune with that, the equal amount of pain that I can inflict on her. So that's something that on a personal level is very, very, I guess, I don't know if you say intimate, but it's very profound for me as well.
I think it's a fascinating characteristic of the Korean culture, and I think probably unknown to many people who aren't familiar with the Korean culture.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, to put it in context, I think from the American side, the sense of righteousness and the sense of equality, how deeply we really feel that in America. I mean, this is something that we value so much within our own being. To that same level, I think, if an American were to see or to experience that at that same level, you'd have what a Korean experiences with that heart and that pain. So that kind of gives you the different, just to give a little bit of flavor of how we, and living in America, can experience what it feels like to be somewhat of a Korean. And I think also it shows, interesting also, is the different characteristics that each kind of race or peoples have from God.
Tell us something about the love-hate relationship that the younger generation of Koreans seem to have for America, which is a departure from the sense of gratitude that older generations of Koreans have for America and its role in protecting South Korea from the North Korean invasion during the Korean War from the communist North. What's the source of anti-Americanism?
You know, living in America, it's, I would really see this from a Korean-American perspective. I can't really speak for Koreans living in Korea. Myself, I'm actually a little puzzled because of the response. For example, recently there was the anti-beef, you know, this huge blow-up over that. What I can say is that I think in Korea, the previous generation, of course, the whole liberation of Korea and, you know, all the suffering ended, even the liberation from Japan, which was humongous, that has kind of faded from the mindset of the Korean people. And I think the younger generation really does not have a sense of what that really meant. I think part of it is due to the level of westernization. Ironically enough, the westernization that Korea has gone through, where the vestiges of what happened in the past have not been totally erased, but are almost forgotten now. So there is less sense of, like as you pointed out, the gratitude that the old generation has, as opposed to the, I don't know what you call the bitterness or resentment towards Americans or America that currently the younger generation has. And it may be that there's a high level of misconceptions being spread in Korea, or some miscommunication of some sort, or because when I look and see on the news what's happening over there, for me it seems more like a mob mentality rather than some well thought out and really deeply felt kind of resentment or something. Because if you really break it down, it's, you know, the Korea and America have such long histories and there's such an intertwined relationship that it would seem that why would you want to damage or, you know, hurt the relationship with a partner country that can really benefit, well, tremendous benefit towards each other. So on multiple levels, I'm kind of, I don't really see it as being something that is necessarily rational. Of course, this is, again, my own opinion, and I'm rather biased because I live here in America.
Sure. Well, I think there's, you know, one thing I left out is the fact that the U.S. had a big influence, or a determining influence, in Korea being divided in the first place. I don't know if that's a component of that sense of anti-Americanism.
I've read in the newspapers that that does occur to them. I'm sure it plays a role, I guess.
And I think there's also some anti-Americanism, communist propaganda that comes from North Korea.
I'm sure there are.
It's also a factor.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What are the biggest challenges facing Korean Americans today?
This is not something that is just unique to Korean Americans. I think for any immigrant, it's really maintaining, deepening one's own understanding of one's own original culture, while at the same time trying to assimilate as best as possible into the culture that I live in. I think that's really something that is of critical importance. When I see myself, even my own experience was that growing up in high school and in middle school, it was really more just an American experience. And as I went through high school towards the junior and senior grades and into college, I became much more involved, or much more exposed to the Korean side, Koreanness of me. And that really made me so appreciative of the different quirks or the different things that my parents brought to my family. And I think, again, that there's such a richness in that. And being a multicultural person, you know, if you go for an interview these days, even speaking 2 languages is not enough. You have to speak 3 or 4 languages to really make an impression. So I think in that aspect, I think people really do a disservice to themselves to not really explore and investigate and really try to learn more about where they come from. And again, this is not just a Korean American thing. This is a Italian American. It's a whatever, Chinese American. It can be any kind of immigrant that really comes here.
So you're saying the challenge is to maintain a healthy balance between assimilating on the one hand and maintaining your own cultural heritage.
Mm-hmm. You know, I do see one particular relationship that is unique in this, in the sense of creating harmony, which is you can, generally speaking, divide or have a sense of the Eastern mentality and the Western mentality. And again, with when I was explaining Confucianism, you know, it opens the door for authoritarianism or for abuse in terms of telling people what to do. Whereas the American side, or the Western side, it's more like anyone can do what they want, which also is kind of, you know, there are definite pitfalls in that. So for me, it's really understanding, it's almost kind of creating a different culture or a new culture, because you can take what's beneficial of my Koreanness and now my Americanness and meld the two together, and what's going to come out of that. I think, you know, from each side maybe, or maybe more from the Korean side, there's a hesitance or a fear of losing what's precious in that culture. But I think for myself, it's taking the approach of what is valuable for me in the Korean culture and the beauty, the things that naturally we want to take. So I think for me, it would be, if anything, it would be a reassurance to my Koreanness that I can draw the beautiful, the best aspects of this, but also take the best aspects of my Westernness and bring the two together, and, you know, create something from the best of both worlds.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. What advice would you give to our audience who may be interested in learning more about Korean Americans living here in America?
I would say watch Korean dramas, because I think to get the quickest, it might not be the most appropriate, but the quickest and maybe dirtiest way to really understand a culture is through their television. That kind of speaks volumes about what we in America produce for the rest of the world, what kind of TV we're producing. But I know that, you know, Korean dramas are very dramatic, very melodramatic. There's a lot of crying, there's a lot of everything. But to understand the trends, especially, understand the nuances of some languages, even to watch someone speak a certain language and the response, I think that's a very critical aspect of how to learn a language and also how to learn the culture. Because to have just a one-on-one conversation, you don't see the context. And in TV also, you see the landscapes, you see the cityscapes, you see the cars, you see the commercials. So you get a sense of what each culture really values through the television.
Jin Kwon Kim, I want to thank you so much for having been a guest on our show today. I've really appreciated your sharing and your insights into the Korean American experience. Thank you so much for having been our guest.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you as well.
Thank you. You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thanks for watching and have a great day.